Welcome to Sales Talk for CEOs. I'm glad you're here. I'll be interviewing CEOs who have successfully scaled their B2B sales organization. In each episode, I'll start by uncovering the sales background of each CEO, dig into the strategies they use to build their sales organization, and wrap it up with what the future holds. We'll cover the good, the bad, and the ugly of scaling a sales organization. I'm your host, Alice Hyman. Welcome to the Expert Series. As I mentioned on my last Expert Series, that I was starting this so that I could bring information to CEOs that they need to know about anything sales in this crazy world that we live in today. I think that all CEOs need to orchestrate the larger group of people at their company to engage customers and provide an exceptional experience. So in this Expert Series, I'm bringing to you the people who I know and love that can really help us engage our customers and make it easy for them to be our customers. So I want to welcome today Brian Carroll, the founder of Markempa.
Hey, Alice. I'm so glad to be here with you.
You are really one of the first, in my mind anyway, and the best in generating leads for the complex sale. This is something you have been talking about for many, many years and have always done really well. And today, we're having even more challenges generating leads for the complex sale. And you and I are boasting all kinds of crazy things out there that we wish would go away. So let's talk about some advice today that we can give to CEOs so that they can really make sure their teams know how to appropriately generate leads for the complex sale.
Yeah, sounds good. Where should we start?
Oh my gosh, there's so much, right? I am thinking that, what we're sending out in terms of written communication, via email, or even possibly in our spammy LinkedIn messages that some of us are sending, it's really annoying. We are just annoying our buyers with our messaging. So why don't we start there?
Yeah, I think the challenge today is just helping our teams really understand the perspective of the customer. And I think part of it is why we're doing the things we're doing is that we don't have our frontline people, our SDRs, our BDRs, in our account executives or salespeople fully grasping the world or experience of their customer. And what I find this starts with is we set our goals. We're now in February, we're in first quarter.
Right.
We know what we're trying to get done by the end of the quarter, by March 31st. And so we focus on what our goals are, how many sales we need to close, how many opportunities that means, what our pipeline conversion is, all these things. And what we miss is that in our outreach to the customers, we actually aren't thinking about what their experience is when we do the outreach to them. So most of the communications are from our bias and from our perspective. Thinking, one, that someone's going to receive our message and suddenly recognize they have a need when they're crazy busy, they're overwhelmed. Instead of trying to better understand the world of our customer, and this is where I find I need to teach salespeople, is looking at your messages in a different way. Thinking about when I cold call someone or I cold email, which most of the time it's cold email, I get many different sequences where it's email 1, email 2, email 3. And it's an automated email. I know that I'm one of hundreds of people who probably received a message from that SDR. And we falsely think that sales is only a numbers game. And what we're missing, though, is if you actually think about designing it from a perspective of how could I be super helpful, uber helpful, the best marketing selling helps customers. And what we can do with our messages is focus on how can we better connect, because we have all these ways to reaching people, but it's harder to actually connect with people. And I start with the first thing I do is I need to help my clients really understand the world of their customer. So And
Let's pause on that for a second, because I think that's a super important point. The first thing you do, like, not help them learn how to write, not explain what kind of messaging, but help them understand their customer. And I do a lot of that too. I call it a day in the life of, right?
yeah,
Where I am talking first to the CEO and saying, do your marketing, customer success, salespeople, operations understand what a day in the life of the people who buy from them is like? These, either your prospects or the people who currently buy from you. What is their day like, and how can we make it easier, right? Make it easier to buy from us, make it easier to be our customer. And on the flip side of that, make it harder to be our competitor. So I think CEOs out there should ask themselves, do I need my team to better understand our customer? Because that's the first thing you end up having to do. It's something that I have to do all the time, is help make sure we understand who our customer is. And what's crazy is, the marketing people are out there defining our ideal customer profile, which is great. Who are the companies that we're going after? And then who are the personas inside of those companies? But kind of just stops there. It doesn't really tell us what a day in their life is like, what they need, what they want, what they're trying to solve, why they might act a certain way, and how they interact with all the other people in the buying process when there is a complex problem that has to be solved. So I see that as such an important thing for us to do, is help our customers understand their customers.
for sure. And I agree with what you're talking about. We will use terms like, what's the voice of our customer? But I think we actually need to understand, what's the mind of our customer? What's the heart of our customer? What are the things that they really care about? And so what I find is moving into being more empathetic about our customers. And how do you do that? It's one, knowing already that we have a bias going in. So just knowing that I have a bias to my product, so my thinking is going to be more oriented to company specific things like, do I have the right product? Yes, I think I have the right product. Is this something customers should buy? Yes. What I need to move is into, it's not about me. It's not about our company that's the hero. How do we connect to our customer's story and what's going on in their world? What are they trying to get done? And the more that I can focus on that, I can start using things. And so what I find is, I love the day in the life. Usually, if we don't know the answer, the easiest way to get the answer is talking to customers. Yeah. So I'm a big advocate for doing customer journey interviews. And I use a technique. It's very similar to what investigators use, detectives use, investigating crimes, which is, I would like to hear, so I want to interview a current customer and say, hey, I want to talk with you because I want to improve the buying experience for other customers like you. Would you be willing to have a conversation with me to share your story? And then I just ask them, take me back to the day when you're first looking for, whatever it is you sell. So when you were looking for workforce automation software, what was it that triggered you to look for that? And tell me about that story. How did you get it done? Because for most customers, their buying experience, especially when you have a complex sale, it's not something people are like, oh, I would love to do that all over again. It was so easy. It was so fun. It was so enjoyable. No, it's like a hero's journey. They're trying to get a bunch of people to go up a mountain. And some people want to climb different mountains. Other people want to take different paths. So this person, I want to interview as the champion, the mobilizer, and to understand, what are the steps you went through? How did you get it done? And what I listen to them is, when we tell stories, we don't always tell them in a linear way. It's all over the map.
Right.
So I usually ask, can I record the conversation? I get it transcribed, and then we start reviewing that. And it's interesting, the words we learn. One client, we found out that they had, their customers were recreating a comparison chart to help them justify why they should buy this versus this. And the marketing team was like, well, we already have a comparison chart. And it's like, well, your customers are recreating something you already have because they don't know that you have it. Or what you have isn't helpful. And so they were able to create some champion kit tools to help the customer go through that process and reduce friction from the buying process. So I think, when I interview customers, I want to know the words they say, not the words I say as a marketer, as a seller, but how do they describe what it is we do? Put that into the messages, put that in the communications so that we're using customer-focused language. The other thing is just understanding, how your customers feeling about where they're at in their journey right now. So if someone's feeling confused, I want to move someone from confusion to feeling more confident or to have clarity. Or if they're feeling overwhelmed, how do we move someone from feeling overwhelmed to feeling calm?
Right.
Overwhelmed, anxious, fearful, lacking confidence. Those are not behaviors we want to stay in as people. Right. We want to move to a better place, but I first got to help meet where that customer is. And then think that's the before version of the story. How do we help them have a transformed experience of the things they do want?
Right.
I want to feel more confident. I want to feel more freedom. I want to feel more successful. So what I find is what we just talked about. If I can better understand the words our customers say, the thoughts they're feeling, the thoughts and questions they've had to get answered for themselves or others in their team, then I can start to plot out a journey and be more like an analogy I like to use is how Sherpas help mountain climbers climb a mountain.
Yes.
How can you be a customer or buyer Sherpa to help your customer? And that's where I think salespeople or even frontline SDRs can facilitate, connecting. So we'll just pause there. I'm sure there's more to talk about, but that's the starting point.
Yeah, I think, all the research shows us, and it's not just the very recent research. In the last 5 years, Gartner and others have been saying, look, this customer journey is confusing, it's hard, it's not in a linear fashion, especially in the complex sale where you have multiple people trying to come to consensus to make a decision, and each one of them has to take their own journey, and each one of them has their own part of the problem they're trying to solve and their own personal wins and their own personal life that revolves around, solving this problem. So we have to recognize that it's not easy to buy, and for some companies, they're not making it easier, they're making it harder, right? Because they don't have these pieces that you're talking about, understanding the journey, understanding the words that customers use, understanding where they get stuck and where they get confused. So we have to stop and figure all of that out, and we have to make it easier for the customer to buy from us. That's basically it. The second thing that I often find I have to point out to sellers, Brian, is that the people who are buying this from you may never have bought this thing before, ever, right? Or if they have bought it, it might have been 10 years ago because of the life cycle of some of the things that we sell, whether it's hardware, software, capital equipment, these medical equipment, right? Some of these things, yes, they get purchased over and over again in a very short time frame. But many of these things get purchased once every 10 years, or this particular buying committee may have never bought this particular thing before. So we think they just know how to buy from us. And indeed, they do not know how to buy from us, making it even more complex. So this is why things like voice of the customer, understanding, getting, all the parts of their journey right, and being able to use their words and dig into their problem and understand it more thoroughly before we start to solve it, and then mapping out for them, here's where we're going to have to go in order for you to get what you want, whether you buy it from us or from anybody, right? These things do help us move the customer forward on their journey.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the part that we need to remember is I was talking to a marketer, and he has a coffee mug he made for himself that says, "I'm not my customer." And the reason being is he was reminding himself, because a lot of times, and there's research that backs this up, is when we think we're being empathetic, we actually may be using our own bias saying, hey, if I were the customer, what would I think? Or if I'm the customer, this would appeal to me. And again, you have your bias, so you got to overcome that. And what I do find that's helpful, though, is to adopt the posture like secret shoppers do in a retail setting. So they go in a store and they see the experience of what it's like to buy. And you can do that same thing with your funnels, you know, and I would say instead of trying to create a funnel focused on conversion, what you need to do first is think about what kind of experience are you designing for your customer? How does it feel? And so ask your team, send me your sequence of cold emails that you send out. It can be very eye-opening. Have your marketing team send you what are the most used funnels we have on our website, and click on the link. And I encourage you, fill out the form. I want you to see what it's like to fill out the form, what happens when it comes back, and then what are the sequence of emails. One of the most read emails can be the welcome series or the follow-up email. It's actually the highest or most read email after someone fills the form. And there's a lot of really missed opportunities because what we're focused on is often trying to get that conversion. And what I found is when you design a better experience for the customer, the results you want, which is higher conversion, often happens. You know, but usually we focus on, I'm trying to get that lift, I'm trying to get that conversion, I'm trying to get that appointment or that demo, instead of really saying, well, what is it that this customer needs and how can I help meet that? And so one of the tools that I use is called empathy indexing. It's really 4 things. The first is I look at whatever marketing message or whatever communication, how customer focused is it? Is this message? Yeah. So, and you can just rate it on a scale of 5. In effect, who's the hero of the story? My product, my company, or the customer? The second thing you can then do is I focus on emotional resonance. So am I connecting to what that customer is likely feeling right now? And you should have a sense of it because when you're communicating with someone, it's not just the words you say, it's not just the message, it's actually when we communicate with someone and connect with them, there's an emotional experience. We aren't thinking machines that feel, we're feeling machines that think. This is something Antonio Damasio, a neuroscientist, proved. Right. He actually proved all of our decisions are made emotionally. So you should be thinking about the customer experience and how emotionally resonant you are. Like, are you connecting with that customer's emotions? And then finally, relevancy. So you and I were talking a little bit earlier and just thinking about the different markets, like who's the persona you're writing for or who's the industry? What are they likely experiencing? Am I using an irrelevant story? You know, and I'll give you an example. I completed a web form getting an ebook on content marketing. And when I got the reply message asking me for a demo, they were talking about project managers and they were talking about IT professionals. I'm like, this isn't for me. I thought this was about marketers or content marketing. I was interested in that. And so they weren't relevant to me, even though they got my interest in the content I downloaded. So relevancy is important. And are you using stories that connect to that customer, that persona? And then finally, clarity, which is just, are you being clear? Is it clear to the customer what you're asking them to do? Yeah. Is it clear to them what the results are going to be or why they should take that next step? And often we aren't very clear. No. So those are 4 simple filters looking at your messages. And I have some tools, but in fact, if you just look at it from that lens, it can help your messaging get better.
So the leaders of companies right now who are concerned about sales, right? They want more sales. Yeah. They want their salespeople to hit their quota. They want marketing to generate leads, right? These senior leaders, and especially the CEOs, what should they be looking for? And then let's talk about how to measure it, because you mentioned a couple of things that, sometimes we're measuring the wrong things. We're looking for conversions when we should be looking for, have we helped them along the journey? And I do think that one of the biggest problems I see with any written communication coming to me trying to sell me something is that they're asking me for an appointment or to do a demo before I even know who they are. It's like, you sent me an email, I've never heard of you before, you haven't demonstrated any value to me or showed me that you know anything about me, but you're asking to book an appointment with me. And then you're sending me another message saying, did you see my message? And I'm like, what? I don't even know who you are. So let's just talk first about what should CEOs and senior leaders be looking for to tell them whether their team understands a day in the life of the buyer and whether they're communicating properly or just annoying the potential buyer. Yeah. And then we'll roll into what should we be measuring, perhaps that's different than what we're measuring now. All right.
Yeah. So most of the listeners probably are going to be B2B who will listen to the show, who have salespeople, complex sales. And I would say that we don't often, at a high level, you might care about brand, but what I would encourage you is to think about your brand differently than just name recognition. Think about your brand in terms of brand as the aggregate experience your customer has. So that email that may be poorly written or poorly connecting to the customer, that follow-up call, and this feeling of annoyance, what that does is that actually connects to the aggregate experience of your customer. So when you're doing things in a way that's not a great experience, where it's irrelevant, where it's not connecting, you actually are programming your customers to emotionally unsubscribe from future messages from your brand. So right now at this moment, if you haven't done this work, your team is probably creating a negative perception, a negative aggregate experience, which is reducing your conversion. And what normally happens is, because numbers may fall down, what do? We do more. We tell our team to do more. We increase the number. We increase the output. And what I found is that it's no longer really about just the quantity of effort. What I would encourage you is focus on the quality of the interaction and experience, number one, and then you can ramp up the quantity. And so the things that I would say CEOs need to look at is, one, what are the trends that you're observing with your team in terms of the output? So I focus on, for SDRs, very simple things. So I look at the quantity of dials, the quantity of quality conversations. And so you can measure a quality conversation being 2 minutes or longer. Data shows that most demos, or the longer someone's on the phone with someone, the higher the likelihood the conversion is going to be. So looking at what's the average amount of time someone's on the phone. And these seem very minutia, but what I find is that then that rolls into conversations to conversions. Now, if it's a demo or if it's a meeting, you got to focus on your conversation to demo ratio. Right. So the numbers I would look at is if you have a high number of dials, a low number of conversations, or if you have a high number of conversations, a low number of demos, what this is telling me is you're not communicating a message that's resonating. So for you need to benchmark that for your team. What I find is we can focus on this vanity metric of marketing qualified leads, MQLs, but what we actually miss is how many of those MQLs actually translate to real opportunities. So you can look at SAL or your opportunity conversion rate. So I usually focus on once I get the frontline stuff figured out, and it's kind of like turning dials. You can emphasize, but we get into the metrics of MQLs to SALs, sales accepted leads, meaning the sales team says I've accepted it. I want to measure opportunities converted, and then I want to ultimately get to that point of measuring closed ones or closed deals. Right. But what I find is that marketing can be asked, we need more leads. They focus on doing something that's going to get you more leads, but it won't be opportunities that actually can convert. The sales team doesn't want more leads, they want more opportunities.
Right.
And so what I find is there's often just, we need to get marketing and sales aligned about, not about how many leads, but how many opportunities we're going to create. You also need marketing to work with sales on measuring pipeline contributions. So what's marketing generated revenue and marketing influenced revenue. And then finally, what I find is that when we can actually start measuring lifetime value of the customer, and so I'm working with several clients right now where we're looking at, they have ideal customer profiles, which is primarily focused on who closes. But it isn't, if you just focus on who will buy, that doesn't necessarily mean who's going to be most profitable. Who's
right.
going to, if you have a recurring revenue business, a relationship business, you need to actually focus on how long will someone stay with us and what the overall revenue is. And so higher LTV is better. And then the other thing we need to focus on is really understanding what our customer acquisition cost is, combining marketing and sales, or SG&A, you may see on your P&L. And what I find is if I can understand my customer acquisition cost to lifetime value ratio, that is a metric that at the highest level can tell you how effective you are at a business level of generating customers and then converting those. So like a 4-to-1 or a 5-to-1 or 3-to-1, you're doing pretty well on your CAC to LTV ratio. And you're fine. Many of you listening, if this isn't something you're familiar with, work with your CFO or your controller to get this metric for you, because this is, in my opinion, one of the most important metrics about the health of your business and how well you're generating customers.
All right, so you just unloaded a lot. So we have to unpack that now because I think there's so many important points there. First one is, as the CEO or senior leader of a company, when you look at sales and you say, oh my gosh, sales are down or salespeople are not meeting their quota, the key thing to remember is more is not better, right? We don't necessarily need more. We need something better than what we're doing. And in many cases, we need to turn down the volume, not so much quantity, and much more focus on the quality of what we're doing. Now, every salesperson wishes they had more sales conversations every day, right?
Absolutely.
Because if they get on the phone with somebody and have a conversation and that conversation lasts, like you said, that's more likely to convert. But what we have here is thousands of dials, thousands of emails, and 1 or 2% response rate, which is just ridiculous and unacceptable. But crazy to me that companies accept that and think it's great. So it's like, wow, now we'll just do thousands more. So we'll just add more SDRs to get these abysmal 1 or 2% response rates. And as you mentioned, the salespeople still aren't getting the opportunities they want. So sales and marketing have to get aligned to talk about how many opportunities do we need to create, and then back up and figure out what the best way to create those opportunities are. And now, if I'm the CEO, what I really want to know is how many conversations are my salespeople having? Mm-hmm. How many conversations? And what is the quality of those? And of those conversations, what's moving forward to whatever the next step is? It could be a demo. It could be involving more people. It could be some kind of POC, proof of concept. But whatever it is that comes next, I need to know how many conversations are turning into those next steps. Now, all the things that lead up to that, as you mentioned, it's okay. If we're sending out messaging through voicemail, through LinkedIn, through email, whatever, through videos, hi, I'm on the video saying you haven't met me yet, but I want to talk to you. Whatever way we're doing that, we have to engage the customer to actually have that conversation. And that's the part that's not happening. So instead of measuring, are we engaging the customer and piquing their curiosity so that they'll talk to a salesperson, we're measuring how many dials. Well, if that many dials didn't get us conversations. Let's do more dials. Or how many emails? Well, if that many emails didn't get us the conversations, let's do more emails. Or how many LinkedIn outreaches? And instead of that huge volume, that huge quantity, we need to take a look at the quality. And you mentioned the CEO and the sales leaders going through their own process, right? Go to the website, fill out the form, see what comes next. Actually read those emails and think about, whether they are engaging you as a person. I mean, one of the things that drives me nuts, Brian, is I get emails from salespeople and I think, did anyone in marketing, did anyone as sales leader, did anyone look at these emails before they were sent out? Who's writing this stuff? Who's approving it, right? So as a CEO, if you haven't seen what your salespeople are emailing out lately, you better get a grip on that, because if you wouldn't click on it, if it wouldn't entice you, it's probably not going to entice anybody else. But again, that's looking at it from our own perspective. What is our customer doing with that messaging?
Yeah, and this is something where I would say, because we have the ability now, there's so many tools available. Yeah. For SDRs, I would encourage CEOs to listen to some call recordings your SDRs have had with customers, just conversations. Listen to it. It's so insightful when you hear both sides of the conversation. Right. What I found is that we get focused on messaging, and we may need to teach our teams to be able to listen to the cues the customer is giving them. So there may be some skills development, and this is in your world, Alice, just teaching people, how to listen, how to process, how to better engage with the customer. And a lot of times we see the frontline SDR or BDR as this entry point. So we have less experienced people who are fairly new, out of college, who haven't had a lot of experience, calling people who generally are more senior, who have more experience. And it's really clear that there's this disconnect.
And they don't understand the day in the life of the people they're calling.
They don't.
It's very difficult.
I used to do a series when I had a company that did inside sales outsourcing, where I titled it "How to Talk to Me." And so it was, my team loved it because it was all about teaching them how to talk to the people they were speaking to, for whatever client or whatever persona. And so teaching your people that day in the life, or in effect, how to talk to me, really is so important. And then looking at the messages, as we've talked about emails, getting those samples, and looking at it from the lens of the customer. The most successful marketers or sellers, I find, see from the experience of the customer. And when I look at turnaround stories, IBM, when they need to go through another rejuvenation, but when Lou Gerstner took over, he was able to re-engineer their whole business because he was a customer.
Yes.
He actually knew what it was like. And so from that perspective, he could re-engineer the business to refocus on what it's like. And even Apple or Steve Jobs, he had a personality that a lot of people saw as caustic, yet at the same time, they were able to really empathize with how do we design an amazing experience of the customer. And every genius bar person that you talk to, everyone who works as a genius in the Genius Bar, has been taught how to empathize and think about it from the perspective of the customer.
Yeah.
We do that same thing in sales.
It's interesting too, because we use this SDR model, which I'm not a huge fan of, because of the reasons we just said. You're using people who are not as experienced to try to book an appointment. They don't understand a day in the life of, and they're just doing a task, right? And really, what you said earlier was we have to listen, right? So how do you listen to me as a customer? Well, we have to have insights and intriguing information, right? That first makes somebody want to talk to us. We don't give SDRs that, and so nobody really wants to talk to them. Now, some SDRs are trained better to do that, but if you think about the fact that the way we keep someone on the phone is by having them do the talking, not by having us do the talking. we have to then have messaging that piques the curiosity, engages, and allows the customer to share something with us, right? And so I always say the only time I'm 100% sure that I have your undivided attention is when you're talking to me. So if I truly want to engage the customer, I have to get them to talk to me. And then I have to be a really good listener and say things like, go on, tell me more. Is there anything else? Can you describe that further? Who else cares about that, right? Instead of me asking them, do you have a budget, and who else is involved in the sale, and, when are you going to need this by, and all of the old typical questions that we're asking, we need to give them an insight, like, have these types of things happened at your banking institution and caused you to get fines? Tell me about that, and, like this happened at this other bank, some kind of an insight that then they can say, oh my gosh, yes, it's caused us a huge amount of struggle. What else about that? What was that struggle like? Who else got involved in that? How did you fix it? Right? Mm-hmm. That's the kind of deeper questioning we need, not, who's going to make the decision? When is the deal going to close? Blah, 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 blah. Because once I have your attention and you see that I can solve your problem, you're going to lead me down the path. Well, Alice, this is who you should talk to next. Or let me gather these people for you. And let me tell you our timeline. And, I'll get everything else arranged. So we now make it easy for the customer to take their journey because we've intrigued them and we've listened to them, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the listening is a challenge because as we often listen in BDRs, SDRs, we're listening, trying to understand where someone fits into our playbook or our script or our call guide. And then we're really listening to see where do I reply. And, I think there's that next level of listening to understand. Stephen Covey would talk about listening to understand. And then even above that, there's this higher level of listening. And this is something that most people don't talk about. And it is, it's a skill, but it's, I will call it empathetic listening. Therapists call it third ear listening, but it's being able to listen to try to understand why is that person saying what they're saying? What's behind it?
Yes.
What, and so, I've attended some, I've done therapy, and I think my therapist is not listening to what I'm saying. They're trying to listen to why am I saying what I'm saying? What's behind that? Mm-hmm. But we also can do that in sales and in leadership as we're working with people. And this is a skill that can be taught, but it requires us to actually slow down and just to be present with the person we're talking to. And I think some of the ways we can help someone open up is, I have someone who's less experienced, talking to someone who's going to be more experienced. How do I bridge the gap? Well, one of the things is that peers, that SDR isn't a peer or that with that person, but we can begin a story of sharing a peer. I was reaching out to you as a CFO of a hospital because we had worked at a similar hospital, and I wanted to share a short story of a 90-second story of how we helped the CEO overcome this issue of better understanding analytics to have better outcomes and reduce costs. And Optum, who is one of the companies that I interviewed as I was learning about this idea of empathetic marketing, they did a lot of research when they were trying to transform their sales process. And when they interviewed their customers, they actually found what the CEOs, CFOs, and they sell mostly executives, healthcare analytics, it's a complicated solution, complex sale, that they wanted to hear from people just like them. Yeah. And so that's what they did is they actually got permission. They recorded interviews. They put together insights from other customers so that that gave their frontline people. So they did a playoff Moneyball because they found that this idea of analytics for healthcare resonated with their audience. And so they were bringing this same idea of how Moneyball worked in baseball towards helping healthcare institutions have better outcomes, helping people get healthier. And so they created some white papers, some books and that, and it ended up driving an amazingly impactful experience because it all started based on customer insight, getting stories, and then arming their sales team. They taught their sales team how to talk to customers to share these stories and use that as the door opener, then opened up more opportunities. And so I think that if you can put these pieces together, regardless of what your company sells, that your team's going to do much, much better.
Yeah. So I think that CEOs need to ask better questions of their team, starting with, what are you doing and why are you doing it? Right. Yeah. And not in a like, oh, I'm punishing you kind of way, but hey, tell me about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Like, what's driving that? Right. And then what are you measuring? Mm-hmm. And why are you measuring it? Yeah. And then even like with listening to calls, people are thinking, oh my gosh, I'm a CEO. I do not have time to sit around listening to salespeople's calls. Isn't that what the sales leader is supposed to be doing? Well, yes, indeed it is. But if you're not asking the right questions and you don't listen yourself every once in a while or read those emails yourself every once in a while, you won't know how to coach your sales leader to make the changes that are needed. So, for example, your sales leader might be listening to the calls that are recorded on these lovely things like Gong and Chorus and all these great tools that we have today. And they're listening. Did the salesperson work the sales process as prescribed? And indeed, the salesperson did. So ding, 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 they get a score. And that score is really good. Now, but the question might be better asked, did the salesperson bring an insight that helped the customer share and understand their problem better, which may not have stayed in this linear sales process that we taught them to do and that the recording tool is looking for? Did you handle objections? How many times did you use the word price, or how many times did the price come up? That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for this deeper level conversation. So when you're asking, oh yes, our calls are going great and they're hitting all, well, what are we measuring on those calls? Are we measuring this deepness, the richness of the conversation, and whether we're helping and we're solving and we're guiding and we're getting people to give us this great information? Or are we measuring, did our salesperson hit all these pieces of the process? So I think sometimes the metrics look really good and then our salespeople still aren't hitting their number. And this is why we're measuring the wrong things. We're looking at the wrong things. Maybe they are sending out thousands of emails, but they don't have the right words. They don't show any empathy. They don't share those stories. They don't let your customer know, hey, we talk to CFOs like you all the time, and here's what we've learned. So I think that as a CEO, you really have to ask different questions, dig a little deeper, and really take the time to see what sales and marketing, what communication is going out from them, and what's coming back. And in the end, is it converting into opportunities? Because we don't care about the rest of it. Right?
Yeah. And I think that's the as I was listening to you, Alice, I think the challenge for sales managers or for teams is that we often are focused on, is our team doing the right things? And I think what we need to go is actually go back to the original question. What are the right things?
Yes.
And then I would focus on, how do I help my team do the right things? And I think right now, because I've been just seeing the changing customer landscape, and what we need to think about is just going back, rethinking, what are the right things? What's the experience I'm designing for the customer? And I find that for CEOs, that's really one of the main jobs leaders need to do, is determine what's the right things. And then is my team doing the right things right? But before that, I got to figure out, how do I help my team do the right things? Yeah. And just a really practical question, when I usually try to re-engineer or focus on how do I help a team, I usually start with asking, a few simple questions. One, I want to know, how do I help the sales team sell, is usually a key question I keep asking. But what are the things I find that the frontline team often knows how they're feeling? Like, do they feel they can be successful? Do they feel that they can win?
Yeah.
Do they feel that they've been set up for success? And a lot of times the answer is no.
Yeah.
And so, usually the three questions I try and understand are, what are the things that we should start doing that we're not? What are the things that we're doing now that add no value and aren't helpful that we should stop? And then the third thing is, I want to understand the hassles the team's dealing with. And there's usually, it's funny when I say, what are the hassles that are just either getting in the way of you being successful? And we think that, again, this is something CEOs need to understand, is a lot of times you can have a team that wants to succeed, but it's like the brakes are on because they have these different hassles pulling on them when they really want to move forward. So, coming back high level, figure out what are the right things. And, today I found that successful companies are moving towards designing experiences.
Yes.
And thinking about the experience of the customer and not just the results that they want. And there are more transactional businesses that probably can get by not thinking about the experience, but they still do in some ways, because experience touches everything. How do you reduce friction? How do you improve the ability for your customers to transact in a smooth way, remove friction, remove annoyance? So those things drive the better outcomes that we want. And that, to me, is something you're never done with. You got to just continue to look at it.
Because it's always evolving, right? It's always evolving. And if we're truly asking our teams, what are we doing to make it easier to be our customer and harder to be our competitor? Then we've got to keep answering that over and over again and making that customer experience better and better. And I really focus on the CEO today, because what I truly believe is every department in the company has to understand the customer experience and what they go through, right? And how we can make it easier. And the only person who touches every department in a company is a CEO. To have that vision and to have that culture built around that exceptional customer experience, the sales leader can't do that. They can only, control what is in the world of the sales people and the sales department. They can't control operations. They can't control marketing. They can't control customer success. So the CEO really has to orchestrate this customer experience and make sure they see it from the customer point of view and make those changes by helping, asking great questions and helping everybody in the company see what an exceptional customer experience would be like and continue to focus on it, because it changes. So we can't just do it and then stay there. We have to continue to change with that buyer as they change.
Definitely. I totally agree.
So, all right. Well, I think we've been at this for a bit now, so we probably ought to wrap it up. But you've just given us so many great points for the listener, for the CEOs to really think about. Just leave us with one last thing that you really want CEOs to focus on to improve the lead generation for the complex sale and improve that customer experience.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I want to leave leaders with is that there are people who love this idea or the ideas we're talking about. And often the question they have is, how do I get my leaders on board? How do I get my team on board? And what I find is that to enable this work, really understand the emotions of your team. So if your team's feeling anxious, afraid, under pressure, what happens inside us is that we have stress responses of cortisol, adrenaline. Inside our mind, our amygdala gets activated, and we move into this fight or flight or freeze response. And so what happens then is our focus narrows. Our mind focuses on one track. Our vision actually narrows because under stress, we move into this mode. And where you want is you need to help your team feel safe. And this is not easy to do, especially if you're in a business that's behind or you're struggling but that's part of our job as leaders is it's the emotional leadership of the team, because when someone is actually able to feel safe, that I can do what it takes to think about the customer, that I can take the pressure off. And when I went through this own experience, that was a lot of what I had to do is unlearn my team from this pressure that I put on them to get these numbers. And I was like, no, I want you to actually just focus on trying to help the customer. But if we do this, we aren't going to get leads. I'm like, trust me, we'll make sure that you're
right.
I want you to focus on that. And so there's this emotional leadership. When people feel safe, then we move into that collaborative place. We're more in our prefrontal cortex.
And more creative so that we can design better experiences, right?
So and collaboration, empathy, all that lives when we feel
safe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I want to always keep reminding CEOs close dates come from customers, not quotas.
Yes.
So what do we do to make it easy for our customer to buy from us versus pushing them or giving false deadlines or false, reasons to buy? Everybody wants to create urgency. I'm like, you can't create urgency. Urgency is on the part of the buyer. And if they have no urgency, unless you are going to really, truly cut them off completely from it, right, there's no urgency there, and they'll just go get it for your competitor. So I want people to stop thinking that way and think like you're thinking. How do I make it safe for my team to exist in this environment, and so that they feel they can be collaborative and creative and provide an exceptional customer experience? Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Brian. This has been amazing. I can't wait to release this podcast to everyone. They're going to get so many great ideas, and I'll write a blog post about it too, pulling out all the best ideas that we've talked about.
Thanks again, Alice. This has been awesome.
Thank you. Thanks for tuning in to Sales Talk for CEOs. You can find me at alicehyman.com. Be sure and connect with me on LinkedIn. And let me know that you heard the show. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe, write a review, and share the show with another CEO.